Hello everyone, thanks for tuning in to today's video. We're going to have a look at the weather next week, 10 days. For today's video, it takes us through the first week of August. We're going to have a 9th of August with this update. So it's been quite an unusual summer so far, and quite an unusual July as well. We've had pretty poor summer really up in the north. The northern part of the country has generally been quite cool, quite wet, quite unsettled. Up until a couple of weeks ago, the south was having quite a hot summer. But school holidays came along, and as often happens, the weather began to change. And we are now in a much cooler, much more changeable situation in the southern part of the country, where we've been all the way along up in the north. So we're going to keep this unsettled and quite changeable weather going over the coming week to 10 days. We might be seeing a few hints of something a bit drier and warmer coming up for the second week of August. Perhaps it's a very long way off, and I don't think it's particularly reliable. But around the second week of August into the middle part of the month, we might see something a little bit drier and warmer then. I'll tell you for everything that's going on right now. So we'll start off with central England temperature from Hadley. It's updated provisional to yesterday, 30th of July, and we stand at the moment at 17.1 degrees Celsius, an anomaly of 1 degree above average. Now, this is probably going to tick down a bit more today because it's a fairly coolish day in the CT region, and then it's usually corrected downwards a little bit at the end of the month anyway. So I suspect once we come to divvy up the final numbers, we will probably find this coming out under 17 degrees Celsius, probably somewhere around 16.7, 16.8, somewhere like that. And a couple of weeks ago, that looked like a very unlikely outcome, actually. It looked like we can have we was guaranteed, really, a couple of weeks ago to have a central temperature above 17 degrees for July. So it has been quite a shift that's taken place to something substantially cooler over the past week to 10 days. I'm a little bit surprised that we are going to come out underneath under 17 degrees Celsius, I should say, somewhere in the 16s. So I think that is going to happen, and it's not going to be all that much warmer, really, for July, but it was in June, because June comes out at 16.0, nearly 2 degrees above average. It is going to be warmer than that, so there's no danger that we'll have July cooler than June. But it's not going to be all that much warmer, and either you could look at it, but it just shows how very warm June was, or it shows you how quickly things have cooled down for July in the past week to 10 days, maybe a little bit of both. It is still going to be an above average month though, and that goes along with every other month that we've had this year, except for January, which we can pretty much call average at 4.0, an anomaly of just 0.1 of a degree above average. But every other month has been above average. We'll be able to include July in that as well, because it is going to be a warm and average month, although by less than 1 degree. So quite an interesting developments taking place during this July. These are the 500 millibar height anomaly flowcharts for the next week to 10 days. We've got the GFS here on the top, and the, no, not got the ECDF here on the top, and the GFS is on the bottom. 500 millibars, 80,000 feet, is an area in the atmosphere, high pressure and low pressure are being driven by a jet stream running above. Blue extrapolates to low pressure, and red and orange to high pressure. So the ECDF has this trough to the north of the country, has a ridge out in the Atlantic, also a ridge over across the eastern parts of Europe. That's going to be bringing a lot of heat to southern and eastern parts of Europe in the next week to 10 days. For us, though, we're still keeping this Atlantic influence, really, with the jet stream. So it remains a little bit on the changeable side, although this ridge in the Atlantic might be offering us some protection because it is blocking off the Atlantic Ocean to some degree, so it might be offering some protection, but overall still quite a changeable opening to August seems likely. The GFS looks like this, quite an odd looking chart. So again, we've got this ridge through the central part of the Atlantic, also that very hot ridge over across eastern and southeastern parts of Europe. In between, there's actually a little bit of a trough. We're doing something like that with the flow and with the jet stream. Now, what the GFS is doing, I talked about this in the Sunday roundup yesterday, there's a lot of heat that's being pushed northwards into Central Europe because of this ridge that's over in the east. And the GFS is developing, there's a contrast, temperature contrast, somewhere around there. And the GFS is developing this low pressure a little bit into quite a major feature on the very latest run of GFS, which we will have a look at in a moment, being fueled by the contrasting air masses. I'm not sure about it, to be honest. I've got a feeling if that does happen, it'll be away from us across central parts of Europe. But that's why the GFS looks a little bit more unsettled. These are the GFS temperature and precipitation ensembles next couple of weeks. The red line here, 30 upper air temperature with cooler than average at the moment. Do go a little bit warmer than average on Wednesday, but it's associated with quite an active area of low pressure. It's going to be bringing a fair amount of heavy rain. And then after that, it's cooler than average, really going through the first week of August. This takes us to the 10th of August, just here, where we're still cooler than average. After that, possibly beginning to lift those temperatures up a little bit, although still nothing really to be getting excited about. For precipitation, fair amount of dry weather next couple of days. Then we've got, although there will be showers in the next couple of days, but for the southeast anyway, fair amount of dry weather. Then we got the rain for Wednesday. It looks quite a wet and windy day. After that, it looks showery. This is the period we've got to watch out for just here, between around the 8th and the 10th. Potentially something could happen there in terms of some quite wet weather being caused by the heat across eastern parts or central parts of Europe, contrasting with the cool air mass that we've got over us. I suspect that contrast in temperatures will happen away from us and probably won't see too much rain from that, but we do have to be aware of the possibility. Temperature anomalies are looking like this next week, taking us from the 31st of July to the 8th of August, and we're cooler than average for the first week of August. Look how hot it is, though, across many eastern and southeastern parts of Europe. A real heat wave coming up there. For precipitation, so we're close to average or a little bit on the wetter than average side for the UK and the island too. Southern and southeast parts of Europe, drier than average, and I suspect this area, but does look a little bit wetter through eastern France into Germany. That's probably going to be the area that will have the temperature contrast in around a week's time, but may get some very wet weather. This is how the GFS is picking things up for Friday then, and we're in a showery west-northwesterly flow. Low pressure is exiting the country and moving in towards Norway, so we keep winds from a northwesterly direction, which looks pretty cool and showery. Into the weekend, and just generally keeping things on the showery side, really. I suspect Sunday might be a drier day as we are building up ever such a slight and a weak ridge from the southwest, but overall still quite showery and fairly cool conditions into the weekend. Now, the early part of next week starts to go very, very slack. You'll notice I've got a lot of heat across eastern parts of Europe, and the GFS, this particular one of the GFS, does develop an area of low pressure here Monday across central parts of Europe. That's being fueled by that temperature contrast, and actually it becomes quite a major feature by Tuesday. Look about it, sitting just off the East Anglian coast, bringing very wet weather to southern and eastern parts of the country, possibly a gale force northerly wind as well. But I have to emphasise I'm a little bit dubious about this. I think we probably will get a significant area of low pressure somewhere across central Europe being caused by this temperature contrast early next week, but I have a feeling it'll be away from us. It'll probably be somewhere over Germany, so I'm a little bit dubious about what that is showing. You can see why that's happening with the upper air temperatures. So there's that very hot air that's pushing up from North Africa and extending into many central and eastern parts of Europe, and then of course we've got this cool air that's out of the Atlantic, that's into the UK and Ireland, and in between the contrasting air masses are producing that area of low pressure. That's being fueled by the energy of the temperature contrast. And yes, I think there will be a significant area of low pressure somewhere through the early part of next week across Europe. But I'm a bit dubious, because we're so close to this cool air from the Atlantic, I'm a bit dubious about whether we will find ourselves in the battleground between the two conflicting air masses. Expect that to be pushed eastwards in subsequent runs. Once that gets out of the way, well, actually, it's fairly good news. I said about it at the beginning of the video. Just look as though to get through to the second week of August, we might start to find more of an influence from the Azores high again. So there's that low pressure heading off towards Denmark on Wednesday next week. And then after that, the Azores ridge is starting to come back. So by the time you get through, we've gone beyond day 10, which I shouldn't really do, but by the time we get through to Friday the 11th, actually we are finding ourselves under an area of high pressure. It looks rather flabby and weak, but that will bring quite a significant change through the second half of next week. Heading into the second week of August, it would bring something rather significantly drier and warmer. And then eventually there are hints of putting a bit of a southerly southeasterly wind, which might bring some hotter air up from the south, and possibly, of course, omnipresent risk of thunderstorms developing from the Bay of Biscay. But we've run out too far ahead, really, with that one. So yeah, finally, so the end of the week looks cool and showery. Low pressure is over Scotland, heading up to Norway, bringing in this cool, showery northwesterly wind into the weekend, and it's staying rather showery in nature, I would have thought. It all looks rather slack, so nothing really is moving through very quickly. If showers do develop, they are likely to be slow moving over the weekend. And the air mass is still from the northern part of the Atlantic Ocean, so it's still likely to be quite cool. Early next week, so we don't get that very significant area of low pressure developing with the ECM WF that the GFS is showing. We just remain in this sort of slack, probably quite showery northerly flow. The low pressure that's actually developing with that contrasting air mass is more around here. Not a major feature on this particular run of the ECWF, but it's across central parts of Europe and it's away from us, so we don't get that major spell of heavy rain and gale force winds that the GFS is showing. Notice by the middle of next week we are beginning to ridge the Azores high closer towards us, and by day 10, there we go, we are back under an influence from the Azores high. So it is possible, and that's Thursday the 10th of August, it is possible that we're going to get into the second week of August after a rather dodgy start. We might start to see things becoming drier and warmer again into the second week of August. It'll be something to watch out for to see whether that does come on. It's been that sort of summer all the way along where we're swinging from high pressure to low pressure, so you wouldn't totally rule out the chance that the Azores could throw another ridge over the country and give us something warmer into the second week of August. We will keep an eye on that, of course. In the more reliable time frame, it is looking unsettled for the first week of August. Going to be quite a bit of showery weather. I'm dubious about what the GFS is doing in terms of that major significant area of low pressure that we've just seen on the 6 o'clock run, caused by the contrasting air masses and contrasting temperatures. I'm dubious about that. Don't mean to be as bad as that next week, but it is likely to be rather showery, especially the first half of the week, and there may be an influence from the Azores high in the second half of next week. Right, that's all now. Come back tomorrow where we will again look at next week 10 days, and we'll also include the CFS V2 for the next month in that update as well. So come back for that tomorrow. That's all for now, and thanks for watching.